Good morning. I'm going to take Richard with me everywhere I go because no one gives a better introduction. He sets the bar high, and I am indeed very, very, very glad to be here, and also glad for the, shall we say, flexibility of Grace St. Luke's. I was supposed to be here a couple of weeks ago. Because of a death in our family, I needed to be away, and the graciousness and flexibility of Grace St. Luke's allowed us to go and be with our family where we needed to be, and now I'm here today. And here with you to talk a bit about this idea of home, as Richard said. Before I start talking, I'm going to get you guys to do a little thinking. Am I loud enough? Am I okay? I'm going to get you guys to do a little thinking. Okay, so if that's gone, am I still okay?
Oh, I thought you were mic'd.
I am mic'd, double mic'd.
Keep going.
Okay, so I need you guys to do a little bit of thinking. You found, are we okay? No.
That was really helpful, what I just did.
All right, so we're going to go with this. And I'm just going to start talking until somebody else comes up and fidgets with something else. I've got like 2 microphones on, so I don't know. Anyway, you have at your tables a packet of poetry and scripture. And there are blank pages in that packet, so I want you to flip over to a blank page. Doesn't matter which one, back page of the whole thing, back page of the first page, I don't care. Find a blank page and find a pen at your table. My guess is these are good church pens and they're new, and you're going to have to scribble with them for a minute before they write, because that's often what happens. And on the back, on a clean page where there's not already other people's words, I want you to write a few of your words, the words that you would use to describe or to speak about your house. Just a couple of words that come to your mind when you think about your house. There's no right or wrong. Half of you are going to put messy. I know I would. I'm going to write about your house. Just a few quick words, first things that come to mind. And now, I would love for you to write down a few more words when I say home. Home. A couple of words, a phrase or two. Home. I'm going to use these words, house and home, interchangeably this morning. But I think that there is a difference. We're going to talk about physical structures, the houses that we live in, the places where we open the door and walk in and sit down and have dinner. But we're also going to talk about that idea, and Richard just alluded to it, that idea of home and homecoming and going home. And for some of us, those are actually different places. In fact, if I were to ask you to think about a couple of places, not your address that mail comes to, but other places that are home for you, I bet you could come up with a few. Places that are home for you other than your primary residence. You might want to write 1 or 2 down. You might just want to think about that. So we've got houses that we live in. We have the idea of home, and many of us have extras, you might say. We have other places that are homing places to us, where we either used to live but no longer live, or places, maybe Grace St. Luke's, maybe a place where you have vacationed, maybe your ancestral home. We have other places where we arrive and we feel like we belong here, and not just the house where our mail comes. So now that you've begun doing a little bit of your own mind and heart work about this, we're going to start with the cross-section of scripture and poetry, and that's Psalms, and Psalm 84. And because we're Episcopalians, and when we do Psalms, we do them responsively, that's what we're going to do this morning. So I would like for the women to read the odd verses and the men to read the even verses, and we're going to read Psalm 84 like that in full. So the women will begin with me with verse 1, and then the men will come in at verse 2, and we'll alternate. How dear to me is your dwelling, O Lord of hosts. My soul has a desire and longing for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh rejoice in the living God. Happy are they who dwell in your house. They will always be praising you.
Happy are the people whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on the Lord's way.
Those who go through the desolate valley will find it a place of springs, for the early rains have covered it with pools of water.
They will climb from height to height, and the God of gods will reveal himself in Zion.
O Lord God of hosts, hear my prayer. Hearken, O God of Jacob.
Behold our defender, O God, and look upon the face of your anointed.
For one day in your courts is better than 1,000 in my own room, and to stand at the threshold of the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of the wicked.
The Lord our God is both sun and shield, and he will give grace and glory.
No good thing will the Lord withhold from those who walk with integrity.
O Lord of hosts, happy are they who put trust in you.
Thank you. This psalm obviously speaks of the themes of home and of travel away, of the pilgrim's way, and then of the return home. And the images are very evocative. A place where a sparrow can build a house, a swallow to have a nest. I had a friend who was on the Altar Guild joke with me about this psalm one day, and she said, the last thing in the world that we want is birds nesting inside the church, right? And it kind of makes everybody who's in charge of buildings and grounds a little anxious and nervous to think about sparrows and swallows. We're actually going to return to the idea of sparrows and swallows in another poem. But to begin again to think about, and I don't want to set up this division or dichotomy between God's home and our home, but rather to think about our homes as God's home. Our places where we go, our places where we are, as places where God is also. And that those things are not separate and divided, but somehow can come together to be unified, to find common ground in that place. I've also given you several verses from Scripture. If you go into one of those Bible search engines and you type house or home, I could have just printed pages and pages and pages and pages of scriptural references to houses and home. The Bible speaks of this, right? We know this. From the very beginning, God created a home in which we live. God created the heavens and the earth and made a big, huge home for all of us. And then we have the stories of the Israelites and their search for home and their aching for the promised land and the return to a place where they can be secure and safe and know that they can abide there in God's blessing. And then there are these later references, and particularly in the New Testament, we hear not necessarily a tension, but we discover a Christ who has no place to lay his head, right? A man who is always moving, who seems to not have a homestead, although he certainly visits the homes of his friends quite often and did find a place from time to time to lay his head. And as I said, scriptures are full of these references and allusions to the idea of what each one of us is seeking for is a home, a place to land, a place where we can be secure and safe in a real, basic way, but also a place where we can feel at peace and that where we can rest. There's a great line, I think it's Augustine who said, our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you. And this idea of we may be traveling the road, but what we're looking for is a chance to sit down and put our feet up and take a breath and to have arrived somewhere. I'm not going to linger with the scripture because there are so many poems that I want to share with y'all. But I also wanted to share one of the, when Richard invited me to be a part of this, one of the very first images and ideas and things that came to my head. How many of you have seen the movie Out of Africa? We love Robert Redford. I do anyway. And that beautiful movie, you know, the safari in Africa and the bravery of Karen, and she goes to set up her farm. There's a side character in Out of Africa that you may or may not remember, this young woman whose name is Felicity. And whenever Felicity comes to visit Karen, she calls out, "Hello, the house!" Every time she comes up, "Hello, the house!" And I will say in my own self-disclosure that this is something that I have been known to do as I come home with my kids in the car. Now my kids will sometimes say, "Hello, the house!" Because there's some idea of not only announcing that you are arriving, that you are coming, and really what she was doing, what Felicity was doing, is that's her version of knocking on the door, right? She's just going to call out from the driveway, "Hello, I'm here," and giving those folks, and particularly Karen in the movie, a chance to come out and greet her and to begin their conversation, to begin their time together, even from the driveway. And this greeting not only really of Karen, but also of the place, of the farm, of coming and knowing that she, Felicity, could find a friend there and could find a welcome there, and that the house itself was ready for her, ready to swing open its doors. So I want to then talk about the physical structures, right? The houses where you and I live, where we are fortunate to have roofs over our head, heat that comes on when it plummets from 72 to 36 like it did from yesterday to today, refrigerators full of food and comfortable beds, and the structures in which we live. There's a poem by Seamus Heaney that talks about the physical structure. It's called Scaffolding. It's the first poem after you turn past the scripture page. And when we think about this, of course, he's talking about the physical structure of building a house, but he's also going to move us beyond that. Here's what he says. Scaffolding. Masons, when they start upon a building, are careful to test out the scaffolding. Make sure that the planks won't slip at busy joints, secure all ladders, tighten bolted joints. And yet, all this comes down when the job's done, showing off walls of sure and solid stone. So if, my dear, there sometimes seem to be old bridges breaking down between you and me, never fear. We may let the scaffolds fall, confident that we have built our wall. In last week's lectionary, Paul talked about and described himself as the master builder, and also described Christ as the foundation. And when we think about the physical structures of our home, and maybe some of you live in homes where you were around when they were being built. The house that I lived in with my parents when I was in high school, I watched it get built. So we would go some days and you could see straight through, and then you'd go back a week later and the drywall was up and suddenly there were rooms. So we got to see the house come together. Now I live in a house that was built in like 1920 or something like that. And I didn't see that get built, but I rely on it. The foundations are secure. Sometimes I wonder, it's a good old Midtown house. But this idea of the physical structures and what they represent, and that someone built them, right? Someone imagined them. Maybe it was you who built your house or who helped design it and said, no, I want the window here and I want this room to open like this. Or maybe you just walked into a house one day and knew, yep, this is the house, even though you had no part in imagining it before and building it. But when we take a moment to think about who built our houses, and how were they built, and when were they built, and upon what are they built? And there's a real tangible, literal understanding to that, and a gratitude that comes from having houses where they work, and the things that the doors open or they don't, and that you kind of have to jimmy them a little bit. and the things that we come to know about our own houses, the walls and the windows and the doors and the creaky floorboard, and where to step if you're trying to be quiet as you're sneaking out of your kids' room at night, and where not to go, all of those things that the physical structure creates a life for us that we may or may not have had any part in creating. Of course, when we talk about houses and we talk about our physical structures, the dining room is here and the bathroom is here and the upstairs or the downstairs or the basement or whatever the situation of your house, we can talk about that and we can point to things and we can say, oh, I got to replace the air conditioner, or I really want to paint the kids' room now that they've gone, or all of those the physical components of it. But when we talk about houses, we're also talking about other things. So is Seamus Haney, right? He's talking about the relationship that's within that. And so, of course, we're also talking about family, and we're talking about meals and generations of people. We may live in a house for not very long, or we may live in it for a full lifetime, and to see generations age and come and go, and new children to be born and brought into the family. We see the passage of time in the context of the houses. Oh, and that was before the addition, or that was after the fire, or that was right before we decided to, renovate the kitchen, or that was just after this, we threw that big party and we had everybody over. So there's a sense of place that has a physical address where mail comes, but also a sense of place of where things happen, where the people in our lives come and gather and are together. And then all the people around them, the neighbors and the neighborhood, the sense of knowing, your next door neighbor's name or not knowing, and what that means for us in terms of kind of grounding us in the places where we live and the street, and knowing, well, the left-hand turn is kind of hard to make, or you need to watch the sidewalk is broken up here, and how we get to know the land around us and also the people around us is helpful, I think, to think about from time to time. As we move from thinking about the physical structures to really using the idea of house and home as a big old fat metaphor for loads of things, I wanted to share with you a poem by an ancient poet named Rumi. Rumi is a Muslim, a Persian poet from several centuries back. Somebody here probably knows, I don't. And he's offered a poem called The Guest House. And very quickly in the first line, you're going to see that what he's talking about is not the physical structure, but each one of us, the human being, the being human. So this is what he writes. The guest house. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. To treat each guest honorably. We have house guests this weekend that I hope we have treated honorably. Family come to town, and we all know, you put out the towels and you clean up and you clear the guest room out from the piles of stuff that it holds when there's not a guest in it, or maybe that's just us. And you prepare, right? And you make space for, and you welcome, and you greet the guest. And here, Rumi suggests that life offers us these opportunities all the time, that we are each morning to greet the day and whatever it brings with gratitude, whatever that is, sorrows or joys, meanness and shame, or happiness and delight. And as we are inching our way towards Lent, to begin to think about Lent in this way, to be clearing us out for some new delight. It's a great description of Lent, right? When we think about giving things up or taking things on, we're preparing our hearts for the delight of Easter. That's really the rationale and the understanding of what Lent is for. So we are being cleared out for some new delight. We are being swept clean in order that resurrection, whatever it may look like, can come our way and can find space in our lives. So we think about house guests, but we also think about all of the things that come into our lives in a more intangible sense, and being ready to welcome them and to give thanks for them the same way that we would, our father-in-laws. The next poem ties into that for me. It may or may not make that same connection for you. When we think about, it's Love After Love on the next page. This time, it's not someone else or something else that we are welcoming. This time, we are our own guests. So that takes a little bit of you have to think about that in your mind. I am my own guest. Love after love. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and will smile at the others, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you have ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. I found when I was working through this material that it's hard to talk about home without talking about being away from home, right? We seem to know the thing in its absence. And here, Derek Walcott, in my understanding, is really talking about those times when we leave ourselves, when we get lost, when we get busy, when we get caught up in other things, and we ignore our own hearts. And, the commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. So we can get really caught up in loving our neighbors and being busy or doing all of these other things and forget that we are also called to know and understand ourselves, to love ourselves, and to be able to welcome our own self back home, to greet ourselves, to sit down, as he says, to sit down and to feast on your life, to pay attention to what's going on in your own heart and in your own life and in your mind, and to feast on that, to prepare a meal the same way that you would for all of those other guests that we were just talking about, but to treat yourself as the guest of honor and to say, I will pay attention to me, to you. That sounds, sometimes it feels a little selfish, and yet the call is that we must know ourselves, we must love ourselves and be able to be at home with ourselves. When Richard was speaking in introduction, he said this idea of being at home in your own skin, comfortable in your own skin, that for me is the compliment of all compliments. When you can say to someone else, he's really comfortable in his own skin, you might as well say, like, that guy is king of the universe, right? I mean, that is to me better than being pretty, better than being smart, better than being rich, better than just about anything, is to be comfortable in your own skin. And I say that as someone who really struggles with that. I'm not terribly comfortable in my own skin most of the time. And so to turn then and to think, okay, sit here and eat and love again the stranger who is myself. To give wine, to give bread, to give back your heart to itself. That this is necessary. And again, in that metaphor of home, we think about, well, we're called to do work and to go out into the world and to feed people and clothe people and to take care of others, but we also have to take care of our own homes, right? If you have a hole in your ceiling, it's really hard to give yourself over to the needs of someone else. So we have to be able to take care and pay attention to our own lives, to feast on our lives. I think that this is aptly described in the next poem, which is by a woman with whom I don't know anything about her, Dorian Lowe, perhaps. This is a new poem that came my way not too long ago, and it's called On the Back Porch. The cat calls for her dinner. On the porch I bend and pour brown soy stars into her bowl, stroke her dark fur. It's not quite night. Pinpricks of light in the eastern sky, above my neighbor's roof, a transparent moon, a pink rag of cloud. Inside my house are those who love me. My daughter dusts biscuit dough, and there's a man who will lift my hair in his heads, brush it until it throws sparks. Everything is just as I've left it. Dinner simmers on the stove, glass bowls wait to be filled with golden broth, sprigs of parsley on the cutting board. I want to smell this rich soup, the air around me going dark as stars press their simple shapes into the sky. I want to stay on the back porch while the world tilts towards sleep, until what I love misses me and calls me in. In order to feast on our lives, we have to see it, right? And here the poet who's talking about feeding her cat, I mean, if you thought poetry could be about anything, sometimes it can be about filling the cat bowl. And she steps outside and is able to see it, right? To see her home, to see the people who live there with her, and to understand the gift of all of that. We do need to sometimes step away, to journey far, to maybe just far enough to be on the back porch, maybe to the other side of the world, and then to be able to look back and see what we have and know that. And we can be grateful for that. Sometimes we can be, we can look back and see that's not the home that I thought I had. That's not the life, and it does need some attending, some work. But this idea of feasting on your own life and really seeing it, really naming it and the specificity of it. Frederick Buechner talks about listening to your own life. Here we see somebody who's looking at her life, or the metaphor of feasting on it. And again, paying attention to the home in which you live, the ground on which you walk on, the people who inhabit that space with you, and seeing it all in a really honest way and appreciating it and knowing, oh, you know what, we really do need to fix the refrigerator. We really do need to fix this conflict. We really do need to attend and listen to one another. And then from that place, from that home, we can then turn ourselves to look at the world around us and to see its needs. So we get a little perspective from time to time to be able to say, not just that I live at 718 Charles Place, but what it means to live there and what it looks like and what it feels like. And is it right? Is it right in the sense of, yes, we are, as the scripture says, a house at peace? Or are we not, and why not? And what does that mean? And what do I need to do? Do I need to call the repairman? Do I need to call the therapist? Do I need to pay attention? Do I need to go to the grocery store so we have milk in the morning? What is it that I need to do to make my home that place of peace? Okay. The next poem, oh my gosh, we're running out of time. Okay, so I'm going to read Waiting, which is one of my all-time favorite poems, and then if we have time, we'll read the 2 Mary Oliver poems. Plug for this great Lenten preaching series, Lenten Wednesday night series. We're going to talk about Mary Oliver a lot. It's going to be awesome. But first we'll do a Raymond Carver poem called Waiting. This is really just, okay, I'll just read it. Waiting. Left off the highway and down the hill. At the bottom, hand another left. Keep bearing left. The road will make a Y, left again. There's a creek on the left. Keep going. Just before the road ends, there'll be another road. Take it and no other. Otherwise, your life will be ruined forever. There's a log house with a shake roof on the left. It's not that house. It's the next house, just over a rise, the house where trees are laden with fruit, where phlox, forsythia, and marigold grow. It's the house where the woman stands in the doorway wearing sun in her hair, the one who's been waiting all the time, the woman who loves you, the one who can say, "What's kept you?" If I were queen of the universe and could rewrite the Bible, I would take that prodigal son story and change some of the characters, and we'd have a prodigal daughter probably and a mother. We think about the story of the prodigal son, right? And the two brothers, and the one left home and went off and, lived the high life, and then was destitute and broke and, probably hungover, and wakes up one morning and figures out what he really needs to do is to go home. And meanwhile, there's the other brother who's at home, has never left home, but not really appreciative of that place. He's the grumpy one, the grumpy older brother. And then there's the father who's there ready to welcome them both, really. The one who's traveled all the way and the one who never left home. Both of them need welcoming. Both of them need to be received. Both of them need to hear, "What's kept you? I have been here waiting for you. I'm so glad that you are home. I'm so glad that you have returned, whether from a geographic journey or from a spiritual one, where you felt far away even though you were here the whole time." And we think about this idea of all of us potentially as prodigals, all of us potentially as the one who are standing in the doorway waiting for the other to come home, to return, whether it's son or daughter or husband or wife or sister or best friend or whoever it is, that we can be any one of those roles at any time in our life, right? We change roles at different times in our life. Sometimes we're the one who drifted. Sometimes we're the resentful one who's sitting there being all stinky mad about things. And sometimes we're the one who opens the door and says, "I love you. What's kept you? We've been waiting for you. We're so glad that you're here." And for me, this is one of the best images of God, right? This idea of God just waiting at the house, waiting for our return, waiting for us to figure out, right, we were restless until we found our rest in you. We were prodigal. We did wander away, or we didn't leave, but we wandered in our own intellect and in our own hearts. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter where we went or didn't go or what we thought or didn't think, that the whole time there was somebody with sun in their hair, where phlox and forsythia and marigold grow, standing in the doorway. What's kept you? Here I am, waiting for you. The house is ready for you. It's been here the whole time. There's someone waiting for all of us. Often we have the job of being the ones who wait. Whichever role or piece of the story we find ourselves living, we can rest assured that we know that our God is standing in the doorway saying, "Yeah, here I am. I've been here the whole time, and I'm so glad that you're here now too. Wherever you've been, it doesn't matter anymore. Now you are home. Now you have arrived." The last two poems are two Mary Oliver poems, and I think we can squeeze them both in. They're similar in the way that Mary Oliver poetry is often similar. She is steeped in the natural world, right? She's kind of like her own Thoreau. Like, she lives and observes the natural world, and from that learns everything that she needs to know. And this one, Making the House Ready for the Lord, is, again, think about it in terms of Lent, of making our houses ready, that's part of what the preparation of these 40 days is, to prepare our homes, whether that's our physical structures or our hearts, for the resurrection of Christ, for the return, for that moment. And you might find yourself on the exact same timeline as the church, and you're ready for your 40 days, or you might be having Easter in your heart today, and so you're all cattywampus and backwards, and that's okay. One of the things about the church seasons and the way that they come is that they remind us that every mode, every way of being has its time and place, and sometimes our lives line up with those perfectly, and we're ready for Lent because we're feeling all Lentish. But sometimes, that's a word, I just coined it. But sometimes we're a little off season, right? And we're ready to talk about incarnation and new birth in the middle of the summer and not at Christmas time. Or sometimes we're ready to talk about resurrection and everybody else has got ashes on their forehead. That's okay. That's okay. What we do in the church is we make space for all of it. We give it a prescribed time to say all these things belong, and your life might line up seasonally in an appropriate way, or it might not, but it's still okay. So that's a digression about Lent, sorry. Making the house ready for the Lord. And again, think back to that Psalm 84 that we started with about the sparrows and the swallows and their nests, right? Dear Lord, I have swept and I have washed, but still nothing is as shining as it should be for you. Under the sink, for example, is an uproar of mice. It is the season of their many children. What shall I do? And under the eaves and through the walls, the squirrels have gnawed their ragged entrances. But it's the season when they need shelter, so what shall I do? And the raccoon limps into the kitchen and opens the cupboard while the dog snores. The cat hugs the pillow. What shall I do? Beautiful is the new snow falling in the yard, and the fox who is staring boldly up the path to the door. And still I believe you will come, Lord. You will. When I speak to the fox, the sparrow, the lost dog, the shivering sea goose, know that I am really speaking to you, Lord. Whenever I say, as I do all morning and afternoon, come in, come in. When she talks about, well, first I have to say, we have fought the squirrel battle in our house, and so I cannot be as kind as she is to say, oh, it's the season when they need shelter, because those squirrels, no, they do not belong in my attic. We've been there and done that. But this idea, much like Psalm 84, and the swallows and the sparrows and finding a nest in the home of the Lord, and also the poem by Rumi, the idea that we are called to welcome it, whatever it is, whether we think we want it or not, to make space to say, come in, come in. And that when we say come in to the raccoon, when we say come in to the joy, come in to the argument, come in, that we are saying to God, come in, come in. I'm preparing my house, I'm making ready for you, whatever you look like, whatever you're bringing me. And the last poem sounds like it's not about houses at all until the very last line. So I'll read it through and then we'll talk a little bit about it. The place I want to get back to is where the pine woods, in the moments between the darkness and the first light, 2 deer came walking down the hill. And when they saw me, they said to each other, okay, this one is okay. Let's see who she is and why she is sitting on the ground like that, so quiet as if asleep or in a dream, but anyway harmless. And so they came on their slender legs and gazed upon me, not unlike the way I go out into the dunes and look into the faces of the flowers. And then one of them leaned forward and nuzzled my hand. And what can my life bring to me that could exceed that brief moment? For 20 years, I have gone every day to the same woods, not waiting exactly, just lingering. Such gifts bestowed can't be repeated. If you want to talk about this, come to visit. I live in the house near the corner, which I have named Gratitude. So this last poem, The Place I Want to Get Back to, the title, of course, is evocative of what is the place that we are seeking? What is the home? What are we restless for? Where are we going, and where are we trying to get to? And then there's this evocative scene of the 2 deer, and that may touch you, or that may seem strange to you. You may live your life in the woods, you may not. But this idea that we all have those moments where we knew, I am at home in this place, this is a gift, right? Whether it's the address where we live or some other place that we visited once or some place that we return to seasonally, year after year, we have those places, and many of us, some of us have had those moments. Often we have to leave it to go away and then come to return to it to understand. Mary Oliver didn't write this poem while the deer were there, right? She had that experience, and then she went home and reflected upon it and thought about it and came to understand it. And that for us also is that cycle of leaving and returning, of going away and then coming home to make sense of what we have seen, or going away to make sense of what home is like for us, and that the balance between the two. So this poem for me raises two questions. The first is, where do you want to get back to? When I asked you at the beginning about house and home and the other places that are home, where do you want to go back to? It's a really big question. The other is this idea that the way that she ends her poem, if you want to talk about this, come to visit. I live in the house near the corner, which I have named Gratitude. What is the name of your house? What would you name your home? There's a quotation that's in the packet that I didn't stop to talk about. It's by, again, another a Persian, a Muslim poet, Hafiz, who says, "The words you speak become the house you live in." What we name things helps to shape their identity. I don't have a name for my house. I say, hello, the house, not hello, something else. But if you were to name your house, what would you call it? And maybe even if you were to hope to name your house, right, in an aspirational sense of not, I wrote down messy and I wrote down, this needs repairing and I really like the paint color, whatever. But what would we hope our houses and our homes are? And what would we hope that they would be called? Is your house a house of gratitude? Is your house a house of love or joy? Is your house right now a house of sorrow? What is the name of your house and your home? So to think about these things, when we think about house and home, and we think about going away and returning, we think about our own lives as houses, our own beings as homes for God. I mean, we could sit here now in silence for an hour, I think, and ponder all of these huge questions. What are we to do with all of this? It's not just the place where the bills come with the mailbox. It's not just the place where, we really need to get back to the leaky faucet. It's not just the place where we're raising children or where we've, wait for everybody to come home for Christmas. What is your home? Where is your home? And how do you name it and shape it and call it? And if you don't have an answer for that, that's okay. To spend some time wondering about that and moving in that direction. And maybe that's Lent, right? To prepare your house. Maybe that's something, another question for another time and another season for you. But again, to pause so that when we look at our houses and we look at our homes and we think about the people who are there with us and the neighborhood and the foundation and all of this imagery is metaphor for, okay, what is the place you want to get back to? What is the name of your house? Those are not questions that I have answers for. I hardly have them for myself. But I leave them for you today, and I thank you very much for your attention.